With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give the fan favorite everywhere belt bag, the real gift is... And when the ultra-soothing Rest Feel slides are the gift, you're really giving them... This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give little luxuries that go beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at Lululemon.com.
His code name's Jackal. He's an exceptional assassin.
Streaming now on Peacock.
He will kill again, unless we stop him.
Academy Award winner Eddie Redmayne.
You're paying me to kill him. I am charging you for getting away.
The Jackal's here. Look at the exits.
BAFTA Award winner Lashana Lynch.
I will find him, and I will kill him myself.
I like to win.
So do I.
The Day of the Jackal. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
The consequences of Feyre's past actions haunt her dreams and waking moments as she learns to accept her new role as an immortal High Fae. In a newly liberated Prythian, Feyre struggles to find her place in a world where she is thanked for the brutality of her choices under the mountain, while also being barred from making positive, meaningful contributions with her newly found strengths. As we join Feyre in the first arc of her journey through eternity, will Feyre find peace, or is she doomed to a life of responsibility and duty that killed her once mortal body?
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, self-harm, and depression will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
It's season 2, and we're so excited to discuss A Court of Mist and Fury. This season, we plan to keep the conversation during each episode within the context of this book.
Now, like season 1, we will discuss breadcrumbs at the end of each episode. What does that mean? This means we're going to discuss pieces of foreshadowing that we catch. One big change, though, is that the breadcrumbs will also contain spoilers for all of Sarah J. Maas's novels where appropriate. So, listen at your own discretion.
If you have not listened to season 1, where we do a deep dive into A Court of Thorns and Roses, we encourage you to go back and listen, though it's not required for the discussion this season. At a minimum, check out our season 1 recap episode.
Here at Book Talk for Book Talk, literary analysis is our specialty, and we know you've been eagerly waiting for us to turn our sights to A Court of Mist and Fury. Over these past few months, we have critically read this novel through different literary lenses. This season, I will continue to provide analysis through a Marxist lens, where I will view different power dynamics amongst characters and the world itself.
I'm back with the feminist lens. Through the feminist lens, I will discuss hetero-gender norms and stereotypes, which in no way reflect my personal views on gender, and this will only be used as a tool I'll use to discuss this novel.
In this week's episode, we're going to discuss the prologue through Chapter 3 in A Court of Mist and Fury. But before we begin, why don't we remind you of who we are?
I'm Jac, an avid reader and writer. I enjoy reading everything from classic literature to modern fantasy and a good fan fiction, especially if it's Draco and Hermione. I did a bachelor's in creative writing and received a master's in comparative literature, which taught me how to critically read and dissect literature.
I'm Amy, a lover of all things related to writing. I've had a love of literary analysis since it was ingrained in me during high school. I met Jac when we attended the same creative writing bachelor's program, after which I received my master's in education. I have a novel in progress that I hate to admit, but I continue to fail to revise because things like this podcast are so much more enjoyable than, the revision process, which sucks.
A question we're going to ask ourselves this episode in these first few chapters is, Is the jump between A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Mist and Fury believable?
So some themes that we're going to see in this book in particular revolve around home. How do we define home and how do we create home for ourselves?
Another theme that we're going to see in this book is that in A Court of Thorns and Roses, the question was really, what does it mean to survive versus thrive? Versus in A Court of Mist and Fury, the theme is what is good and what is bad, and what are your personal morals?
Themes we see in these chapters particularly revolve around PTSD and how it manifests for all of our different characters.
Another theme we're going to see is blame. Who has it and who deserves it?
So let's jump right in.
Head first
Into the prologue. Contrast, contrast, contrast. That is something we start off right away with. The use of contrasts by Sarah J. Maas highlights Feyre's inner turmoil and current mindset as we begin this novel. Feyre is the opposite of what she sees as good. We see this in multiple different aspects of this prologue. To quote, "Maybe I'd always been broken and dark inside. Maybe someone who had been born whole and good would have put down the ash dagger. Quote, I knew the words she'd say, the prayer she'd recite. I knew I'd slaughter her."
The imagery of good and bad, that's what we're really seeing here, right? Good is she's a prayer. Bad, Feyre is slaughtering. Feyre has drawn a clear line and feels she is only good or bad. Her evolution in this book will show her progress in this concept of her being really, she thinks, bad and eventually good.
Or kind of a balance of both.
Yeah, she never really accepts good entirely. Another quote is, "I was the butcher of innocence and savior of the land." Feyre has the opposite of a savior complex. In order to save people means she has to lose herself. And we can see that in book 1. She saves her sister by feeding them and protecting them, but she lost herself by killing the fairy wolf and then being taken by Tamlin.
We continue with the contrasts by the following quotes. Quote, "I reached for the second ash dagger atop a black velvet pillow, its hilt icy in my warm, damp hand. Quote, any human imperfections smoothed into a subtle, immortal glow." SJM is creating a level of discomfort here for us as readers. Just as Feyre is uncomfortable with this immortal self that she's beholding, we are also made to feel Feyre's discomfort for ourselves.
I loved when you point that out, the contrast between the icy hilt, but then her warm hand.
And like the human imperfections and then the immortal Fae glow.
Yeah. And like you said, like it really does make us feel uncomfortable without us realizing that we're uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Amy's back with her amazing titles for each section. So self-hatred is the name of the game, which is accurate.
You guys don't get these titles, but Jack has decided you're going to hear some of them.
Some of them are solid, pretty solid. In ACOTAR, Feyre never questions her morality. It never is a matter of her being good or bad, but rather a question of survival. In this book, we are setting ourselves up for the question, what is good and what is evil? Feyre herself has assigned herself as bad and will continue to use that as a measuring stick of what is bad. Another quote that we have is murder, butcher, monster, liar, deceiver. I didn't know who I meant. The lines between me and the queen had long since blurred. She's talking about other people's identity. Who did she deceive, really? Literally no one. The lines between her and Amarantha are gone, so Feyre now accepts that she's just as bad. This is who she is now. She takes on other people's identity. She deceived no one.
You know, I wonder about that. Did she deceive herself into believing she was doing this for Tamlin?
Yeah, the only person she deceived in book 1 is herself.
Yeah.
Just stop blaming yourself, Feyre. An additional quote in this prologue is, Amarantha drawled, her red hair as bright as the blood on my hands. Several things are happening here. One, it's the connection between Amarantha and Feyre, the linkage, the guilt, the blood. 2, the theme is red. We're going to see how Feyre interacts with that color throughout the entire book. And 3rd, this is a literary nod to Shakespeare with Lady Macbeth yelling, "Out, damned spot, out I say." Do you like my accent?
I love it.
Thank you.
You did a wonderful job. So Feyre is facing this female who's waiting for death. And the quote specifically says, I face the female waiting for death, that hood sagging over her head, her lithe body steady. We learn in this moment that this is Feyre as an immortal. And the mortal Feyre, the point of view we're seeing this immortal through, is unsteady and trembling. What we're beginning to learn here as Feyre compares herself to Amarantha as well is that she hates herself. Remember how much she hated Amarantha? She is setting herself up to hate herself a lot.
No one hates Feyre more than Feyre hates Feyre.
Nobody wins the trophy for most self-hatred except Feyre.
True.
She views her immortal self with hate. She sees hollowness, despair, corruption, even though others don't have this view of her. You know, I wonder, does this mean she knows her intentions to save Tamlin were not true? Something she says earlier on in this prologue is to free them all, to free Tamlin. And note that Tamlin's second in that order of why she did what she did.
Also note that the blames with Tamlin and the whole concept of who to blame, it's beginning to crack, right? There's no freeing all without freeing Tamlin. They are one and the same.
That's such an interesting thought, like such interesting logic that if you want to free all, you free Tamlin. If you want to free Tamlin, you free all. And is she okay with that?
I don't know. I feel like I'm just like compartmentalize, you know, like
separate them.
It's easy. I've done it my entire life. Like just ignore the fact that Tamlin was there. You freed the world and just go move along with that.
Hooray!
Hooray! Feyre just likes to keep punishing herself, and she just won't let this past mortal self go. Except she is letting her go. A quote is, "Flecks splashed on my worn boots, remnants of a mortal life." She's truly left this mortal world, and she's reminding herself that she's left this mortal world really as a punishment.
And something that you're going to say later that I love and that I think kind of reflects back to this, to free them all, to free Tamlin, is the fact that Tamlin is her punishment.
Yeah, she completely uses Tamlin as her punishment. I can't wait till we talk about that.
I love
it. It's going to be good.
Something we see here in this moment, as well as in chapter 1 in a little bit, is this theme of brokenness. So if not only is she hating herself, not only is she punishing herself, she views herself as broken. She acknowledges that she's being broken and fractured bit by bit.
She's totally okay with killing herself, metaphorically and honestly probably literally. In book 1, she couldn't see herself without seeing her sister or her mom, both of which she hated. Now she can't see herself without seeing the murder.
Which is so interesting then that the mortal self wants to kill the immortal self here in this prologue. The only thing she has been sure of these 2 pages of a prologue.
Yeah.
She's so sure about the desire to kill herself. Her hands do not tremble as she prepares to kill her immortal body.
Oh my God, the chills when you pointed that out. It was like, that's the only one that she was like, all right, cool, game. Let's do this.
Let's plunge.
Let's plunge it in. And another quote here is, "and plunge the ash dagger into my waiting heart." Her willing to plunge the dagger into her heart is probably the most obvious metaphor, and it means she hates herself. This, just because it's an obvious metaphor doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that SJM is just kind of like, hey, Feyre hates herself. Let's get on board here.
And quite frankly, I love it.
Yeah. Just because it's obvious doesn't mean it's, again, like, it doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that it loses value.
No, not at all. Because you don't expect her to go through with it, right? Because she resisted so much killing that second fairy in Thorns and Roses. So the fact that she's willing and able to kill herself in this nightmare speaks volumes about where Feyre is at.
Dare I say, chef's kiss?
Chef's kiss.
That was just the prologue.
It's crazy that we had that much to say about the prologue.
Just wait till we get into chapter 2.
Oh my gosh.
So as we start chapter 1, part 1 is called House of Beasts. And the imagery there is animalistic, as well as beasts are considered dangerous. This could be Feyre's view of Tamlin's home, Rhys's home, or even herself. It's not called Home of Beasts, it's called House of Beasts, which means there's a show of distance and an attachment there.
As a first chapter, as we enter chapter 1, this really does achieve a lot in a little bit of time. We get a summary of the last act of Thorns and Roses and its immediate aftermath. We understand Feyre's mindset, and we know to a certain extent the current status of her relationships with Tamlin and Rhysand.
To quote chapter 1, 3 months of adjusting to my immortal body, to a world struggling to piece itself after Amarantha had fractured it apart. Feyre at the beginning of book 2 is so similar to the Feyre at the beginning of book 1. She's a broken down person who really has no hope. But now she's identifying herself with the Spring Court and the fact that the Spring Court itself is broken. She finds strength in her surroundings, rather than her home. So like with book 1, she found strength with her sisters and the fact that she was able to protect them and feed them. And then eventually she was beginning to find strength in the spring court when it was slowly becoming her home. But now she's finding the same strength, or rather lack of strength, there at the spring court because it's just as broken as she is.
That's actually a really interesting point that you bring up, because in book 1, in Thorns and Roses, she talks about Tamlin thawing her icy heart. And where's the first environment she's in? She's in a snowy forest. Mm-hmm. So she really does reflect her environment, or the environment reflects her.
Yeah, it's true. Additionally, another way that Feyre is starting off this book the same way as she did with book 1 was her struggling with and being very conscious really of her own body and what she thinks it should be. As we go on, we'll see that she's physically strong, potentially even stronger than Tamlin, and that goes against the gender norms that Tamlin wants. She is a female, therefore she should be weaker, and her strength is a reminder of what her body should not be in her mind, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Immortal strength, more of a curse than a gift.
This is a quote we're going to discuss a little bit more in a second, so hold tight. But you keep going, Jac.
Oh, okay. We must remember that Feyre's life and her powers were given to her by 7 males. She is a product of them and now has to hide her power for safety from them, and also ultimately protects their ego. All the while, she suffers while not claiming the power. Eventually, she'll claim the power, claiming the masculine, ultimately finding the balance between feminine and masculine that she craves.
You know, this is such an interesting thought, because we have definitely had a listener reach out to us. I can't remember if it's via email or DM, but they're like, Feyre only has what she has because of men. Yeah. And it's so annoying that she never gets it for herself. It's the men who are giving it to her.
Like, yes, she goes and reclaims it. Good for her, but it's still always been given to her by men.
Right. Like, even think about High Lady. She's only High Lady because Rhys
gave it to her.
Yeah.
There's never a moment of her saying, okay, cool, mine.
Right. Exactly. Like, this is what I want. This is what I'm going after.
Like, sure, that's not really Feyre. I don't think that's her personality. That's way more Nesta.
Yeah.
But it's a little disappointing.
It is a little bit disappointing.
Not critique on SJM's part. More.
No. This is the character we're dealing with.
Yeah, we're analyzing.
The nonchalant references to Feyre's immortal strength should not be taken lightly, even though Feyre does minimize it herself. Feyre's choice to minimize her new strength is a reflection of how Tamlin and Lucien treat her new powers. And, quite frankly, it's a coping mechanism on her part. What does she do? She bends cutlery and she smashes doors those first few weeks that she's back in the spring court. This is a call out on SJM's part, back to 2 recurring objects and images we discussed during season 1 when we looked at Thorns and Roses. They don't necessarily lose meaning here. What was cutlery? Cutlery was the truth, and what's happening is being bent again.
Also, if we remember, with Thorns and Roses, cutlery was Feyre's source of trying to regain power in the first book, and now she's bending it. She's losing what previously gave her her source of power.
And then there are the smashed doorways. Feyre smashes 5 glass doors.
5.
5. And if you recall, smashed doorways in Thorns and Roses was a symbol that the previous chapter of Feyre's life is over. And she is here after Under the Mountain smashing doorways. And what does that mean? That chapter of her life is over. So can't ignore those because they're beautiful.
It's just funny where it's like her chapter's really over, like 5 pages, like 5.
Like, just in case you missed it the first time.
Exactly, like really, really over.
So as I mentioned from the prologue, there's a lot of cracked imagery that continues here. We see in chapter 1 the use of words like fractured, cracked, splintered, shredded, wrecked. Like, don't forget, Feyre's broken.
In case you missed it. In case you were wondering she was thriving.
She's not.
Yeah. 30, flirty, and thriving.
Oh, she's 20.
Broken.
I need like a T word. Something. I need to I want to think about this so bad. 20.
Tearing
and
up.
Trying. Yeah.
20 tearing and trying.
These are words that are used to describe Feyre, but also are used to describe things around her. This is an important look into Feyre's current mindset. If you didn't get it from the nightmare she had in the prologue, SJM is here to remind you. And as we just mentioned, Feyre's environment reflects her. And the fact that there's cracked windows, which weird that Tamlin's Manor has a cracked window.
Yeah, like no one's on top of that. It's
right.
like fully staffed again.
Right.
What's Alice doing?
Exactly. So it's important to pay attention to the environment is what we're saying. It also brings into question Feyre's reliability as a narrator. If you recall in season 1, we talk about how Feyre isn't always a reliable narrator in Thorns and Roses. So if she's cracked and broken right now, how will her biases and brokenness influence how she gives us information now?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, all of season 2. Please continue to listen.
Nice.
Additional imagery includes Rhysand, night, stars, moonlight. It's all there in the beginning. One of the quotes is, "Moonlight leaked into the massive marble bathroom, providing the only illumination as I was quietly, thoroughly sick." An additional quote, "Where I could see the night sky, where the breeze could caress my sticky face." The breezes are back, baby.
Baby.
And so is the Rhysand imagery, which is only going to get stronger in this book since he's one of the protagonists now. And every night reference, it's going to be important, and we're going to keep pointing it out. Also, why is her face sticky? Like, I know it's because she's sweating, but it's
she just vomited?
I know, but it's so graphic.
What are we achieving with all this cracked imagery, these contrasts and contradictions? What we're seeing here is Feyre's pain, and we're seeing her PTSD manifest itself. She talks about freeing the Spring Court in Prythian by breaking herself. Her immortality is more a curse than a gift. Eternity is not long enough to fix herself. This last point is particularly important. How Feyre views immortality, and her immortality specifically, will change throughout the novel.
Feyre of Book 1 is well and gone. Book 1 Feyre was about surviving and was happy to just eat and maybe pay and nothing else. She's died, and this is a rebirth. This Feyre doesn't even want to survive.
And we see that in this particular quote. "Be glad of your human heart, Feyre. Pity those who don't feel anything at all. I wish I felt nothing. I wished my human heart had been changed with the rest of me, made into immortal marble, instead of the shredded bit of blackness that it now was, leaking its ichor into me." This is a vehicle for her guilt to manifest. Her human heart, which her immortal mind views with disdain, is black, and it is poisoning her. I'm sorry, but the old Feyre cannot come to the phone right now. Why? Because she's dead.
Wait a minute. Was this a quote?
This was a quote you said to me at one point.
Sorry, real quick, off topic. We talk about like her human heart, right? Human hearts aren't that different than Fae hearts. The only difference is that the Fae have lived a long time and they're bitter. But we've proven clearly that the Fae can love and are angry and are hurt as much as human hearts. If anything, probably more.
You know, it takes me back to something Tamlin said about Feyre. And remember how we talked about her human joy fascinating him?
Mm-hmm.
I think at that point he talks about how humans feel so intensely and quickly. And I think the idea here is that humans experience emotion more intensely and those emotions come to fruition more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Which is why no Fae has ever reacted in the history of Fae.
No, they are all stoic creatures.
Just reserved. No one makes a sudden move.
Nobody gets angry at anybody.
Coming back to Feyre and her struggling with PTSD, she needs to hyper-focus on what is real in order to cope with her flashbacks. But at the same time, she's not actually accepting her reality. One of the quotes, "I curled my knees to my chest, real, real." But she doesn't want to accept what's actually real, which is her relationship with Tamlin and Ianthe and literally everything else.
So, like, what does she want?
I don't know.
Besides death?
This is so dark. I'm just imagining like book 1 Feyre, I just want to eat some food and paint and marry off my sisters. And book 2 Feyre is like there's her reputation phase. That's
Hello,
what this is.
Darkness, my old friend. It is her reputation phase. Sorry.
It is. There's a lot of reputation quotes.
Yeah. What is real in this moment is that Tamlin is physically present, but not emotionally available. What is happening here is that we're seeing Tamlin claim power by choosing ignorance. And we saw this a lot in book 1, but it's really important for every character in this novel. Tamlin doesn't bother to wake, or he refuses to wake to acknowledge Feyre being sick, as if her illness is burdensome or that by ignoring it, it doesn't exist.
Oh, it's so annoying. It's so painful.
what he's doing here is he's controlling the narrative of their relationship and their healing process. And by ignoring her and refusing her any emotional intimacy, he's also refusing to acknowledge the PTSD that they are both experiencing.
They are both living their own blind worlds. One of the quotes is, "Sometimes I wonder if I heard his breath catch. I never had the nerve to ask if he was awake." She fears him already, the fear of emotional intimacy, rather, just as he fears emotional intimacy with her, and neither of them are willing to connect. Another quote, "It was easier to not have to explain anyway, to not have to tell him that though I freed him, saved his people and all of Prythian from Amarantha, I'd broken myself apart." Granted, with this, she is both making excuses, but also not willing to reach out with him. I'm not putting the blame on Feyre, but I think it's important to realize that they're both in a very broken relationship and neither are reaching out to the other, but probably both expecting it.
To what extent are they not reaching out to one another, either because to reach out is to acknowledge their brokenness, or maybe they don't feel deserving of help?
I can see that. I mean, like, Farrah's busy wanting to not be alive anymore, so of course she wouldn't think that she deserves any of the help. I wish we could get, like, some point of view from Tamlin's perspective, because I know, like, on the surface, everyone believes it's a whole lot of, like, la, 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 we can't let her win, you know, back to normal. I'm sure there's a lot more complexity to him than that, too.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, he is a tragic character, as we established in season 1. Mm-hmm. He does have a lot of his own problems and his own history that influences the choices that he makes. So on some level, either he thinks he's also equally not deserving of help, or that this isn't worth addressing. I don't know.
Yeah, somewhere in there. But I mean, really, Farrah's angry at him for never acknowledging her own pain and the struggle. She even says, "He never woke when the nightmares dragged me from sleep. Never woke when I vomited my guts up night after night. If he knew or heard, he never said anything about it." Granted, I'd be pissed about that too. So.
Oh, yeah. That's not okay. It's like, Mom, I puked in your bathroom so that you could come take care of me.
I'm also not like a quiet puker. There's a lot of tears involved. Mom, help me.
Let's go back to Thorns and Roses. Tamlin and Feyre in book 1 avoid talking about things, and Feyre acknowledges that here as well in Mist and Fury. To quote, "It had become our unspoken agreement not to let Amarantha win by acknowledging that she still tormented us in our dreams and our waking hours." Excuse me, how can it be an agreement if it is unspoken?
It's not, there's no such thing, Feyre. There's no such thing as an unspoken agreement. I hate when
people talk about unspoken agreements. It's BS.
Chris Evans and I have an unspoken agreement to hook up next Saturday. But it's unspoken. So
unspoken.
He'll get on board eventually.
Feyre, in doing this, has given Tamlin power over their relationship. She has submitted to his desire to remain detached from the bad things in their relationship and or their mutual experience. This is emphasized by the quote that you read, that she wonders if he's awake because of the catch in his breathing. But quite frankly, she won't call him out on it.
But she keeps blaming him for submitting too. Like, it's such a back and forth blame here. One of the quotes is, "For him, I'd done this. For him, I gladly wrecked myself, my immortal soul. And now I had eternity to live with it." There's so much to unpack here. But first, we can confirm that in Feyre's mind, it was all for Tamlin, right? The it she must live with is him. Already, he's her own punishment. He's a reminder of what happened, and she's not looking at him as a reward, but rather as a life sentence.
What's so interesting, though, Tamlin views her as a reward.
Ooh.
So even though they both are struggling here, they both have PTSD, only Feyre feels like she got sentenced to life imprisonment.
Or Feyre is also a prison sentence for Tamla, as Tamla. We never get his name right.
No, we don't.
Is also a prison sentence to Tamlin, but rather than a constant punishment of like what happened under the mountain, it's a constant punishment of you're never capable of protecting anything.
Oh.
They just want to punish themselves. At this point, it's not a matter of love, but how they can punish themselves the most.
That is such a good point.
Drop my water bottle.
That was a mic drop. No, that is such a good point. I was going to say he's making the best of the situation, but no, it is a constant, like, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
They're both feeling this way, but
they both want to feel this way.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing, is that neither of them want to heal.
Nope.
They just keep wanting to be in their own pain. But at the same time, it's also a certain amount of blame to one another.
Oh, man. How messed up are these two?
If only it was like a decent breakup, like an amicable one, it would have saved a lot of pain here.
Lots of pain.
But let's go back to why Feyre did all of this, right? Like the wrecking of her soul. What sparked Feyre to go back to Prythian was because of Claire Better and how she died. Feyre wanted to see if she could stop the then blight from going into the human world. Feyre is blaming Tamlin for what she went through, and in part, sure, yes, but as a whole, no. She saves everyone, the entire land, and she knows that. Is it fair to 100% blame Tamlin? Like, a solid 95% yes. But sure, but the whole world, like, you can't blame the whole thing on him.
So what we're seeing here is that Feyre's not taking ownership, right? She's not taking accountability for her actions. But you know why? Because this is straight out of Tamlin's playbook. He refuses to take accountability for his actions, so she's going to blame him. And he refuses to take accountability for his actions, so he blames her. Think about it when you're in a fight and you know you did something wrong, but someone else did something wrong as well. If you can just both come to a compromise and acknowledge that you both did something wrong, it's all going to be fine. But because the other person refuses, it's just easier for you to like force blame onto them than to acknowledge your own blame.
It's true. But I'm going to like push a little bit here. Did either do anything wrong? And I know we talk shit on Tamlin a lot of like, he did nothing to save her in the end of Thorns and Roses, which is true. And I think it's BS, right? I agree. He should have done something. But at the same time, if we're going to follow his logic of like, he was trying to protect her, I don't know. I actually do blame him. I take it all back. He sucks. Continue. So to go off of our discussion, another quote is, I knew similar dreams chased him. I'd awaken, tried to speak to him, but he'd shaken off my touch. He spent the rest of the night sprawled across the foot of my bed, monitoring the doors and the walls of the window. I bet her feet were very warm that night. I'm just going to say that. This is more than him not being able to communicate. This also shows he follows the idea that men should be the strong protector, and that he's hiding his own PTSD. PTSD, which is only fueled by his own past trauma of him not being able to express himself. All of book 1, he doesn't express himself because he's had an abusive childhood.
I mean, and as we just mentioned, it makes him tragic. It makes him a tragic character. And we can't forget that he is a tragic character, but that doesn't make his choices okay.
There are plenty of people who are tragic. I tragically didn't eat all my food today. And you know what? I still managed to not be an asshole.
That's not what I was expecting.
That's exactly what you were saying.
Yes.
We're going to see themes of Tamlin being trapped by gender stereotypes throughout the book. It's nothing new or surprising, but we're going to talk about it in a new, surprising way. The final point that I want to make for this first chapter, because yes, we're literally only talking about chapter 1 now, is the same question we had for the first book. Was this a solid first chapter? And I'm going to say yes. Just as Sarah J. Maas did in the first book, there's some really tight writing here. Not a single bit of dialogue, and the action itself is minimal. Feyre goes to the bathroom and throws up. That's it. But Sarah J. Maas is catching us up on the mess that's happened these past few months.
That's such a great point that I didn't even think about, that there's this parallel between the first chapter of both books, that there's some action, minimal action.
Yep.
And there's no dialogue. It's all in Feyre's head.
It's all in Feyre's head.
And it's short and it's concise and it's punchy.
It does so much groundwork. It just kind of makes me think of like my own writing.
I know. It makes me think, oh, my first chapter is too long.
It's like, are people talking? Do I need to like do some pre-talking?
Do I need to cut out the talking?
Is that what we're doing, Sarah?
I don't know.
Is that what you're telling us?
So finally, guys, you've listened this far. We are now going into chapter 2, and let me tell you, this is the longest chapter of our combined lives.
Really, though? Really?
We've already spent a whole episode on just the prologue and first chapter. Now we're going to spend a whole episode on chapter 2.
Whole episode?
We've been recording for 46 minutes.
Oh my God.
So despite the signal that maybe a chapter of Feyre's life ended and a new one has begun with her immortality, Feyre is stuck in some old patterns placed into a very specific role at the hands of Tamlin. Despite her acquisition of immortality, Feyre of early Mist and Fury is not unlike Feyre of early Thorns and Roses before the events of Under the Mountain. Like Thorns and Roses, Feyre is not allowed to be helpful, though she has a clear desire to help rebuild the villages in Tamlin's lands. Feyre even offers to hunt for the villagers, something everyone knows she's good at. But Tamlin denies her that opportunity and denies her that identity that she craves.
Feyre's willingness to hunt for the villagers is a huge change from Book 1 Feyre, who did not like hunting or killing. There's a certain primal understanding of death and survival that she now understands on a deeper level in this book. And while Feyre is asking to help rebuild the village, she's actually asking to rebuild herself, and Tamlin is refusing her to heal.
I almost couldn't hold back my of approval because it's such a good point.
He's like, nah, babe, don't need to heal.
I got you, which means fuck you. You don't get to heal.
I know, right?
What we're seeing physically at the start of this chapter is that Tamlin and the other male Fae are positioned on horses they don't need, and they use them to appear normal.
Slight pause as we were prepping for this. I think, Amy, you said Fae male, and then I was like, what's a Fae male, Amy? A fail.
A fail! I think I said may fail.
May fail. Like, yeah, what's a Fae and a male together?
A fail.
I don't know why I'm so entertained by that. Another quote we have here is, sometimes I wondered if the horses were just to maintain an appearance of civility and normalcy. In the first book, Tamlin is a beast without claws, and he accepts his more animalistic side. He growls, he tries to hold back. As we see him now, he's trying so hard to be a gentleman rather than himself. He's trying to fit Feyre into a mold, but he's also trying to place himself into a mold too.
I did not make the connection that he was trying to be a gentleman. It's such a great point. So as Feyre is asking to help Tamlin, Tamlin's saying no. He tells her to, quote, I can't do what I need to if I'm worrying about whether you're safe. And let me tell you how angry this makes me.
Tell me how angry, Amy.
This makes me so angry. Tamlin did nothing to help Feyre while she was mortal and fighting for him. And now she's immortal and more capable than before. Yet, Tamlin paints her to be just as vulnerable as before, even though Amarantha is gone. He is using his feelings as a tool to control Feyre. He uses the disguise of emotional vulnerability against her by making her feel at fault for his worry. The way Feyre can help is by not making Tamlin worry. This sets the stage for convincing Feyre that her usefulness and her value is minimal to none.
Once again, the responsibility is on Feyre. Feyre is in charge of Tamlin's emotions to feel better. Quote, if she would... Actually, this isn't a quote. This is my quote. This is me pretending to quote Tamlin. If she would just try to be better at staying safe, then I wouldn't have to be this paranoid. Me. That's a direct quote. That's not.
On page 18.
Tamlin also tells Feyre about the return of the Naga. Feyre says, my stomach turned over, not just at the lie, but Naga. Sometimes I dreamt of blood showering me as I killed them, of their leering serpentine faces while they tried to fillet me in the woods. So, remember in book 1, she talked about being afraid, but we also established that in book 1, this was a huge part of the beginning of their romance, Feyre and Tamlin. Feyre admires Tamlin's body through his bloody shirt. And like when the Naga originally killed, like seriously, go back to season 1 and listen to it.
We definitely talked about that.
Like
and joked about it.
Yeah, like she in that moment she was like, "Ooh, he's got some muscles underneath that bloody shirt," and it was a hot romantic moment. But now she's like, "No, trauma. It's no longer hot
because Tamlin's no longer hot."
You know, yeah, you're willing to accept non-hot things from people you think are hot, like bloody shirts.
It's true. It's true. I would totally take a bloody shirt from Adam Driver if he wanted to give me one.
You're like, oh no, your shirt's been covered in the blood of your enemy. Okay.
Give it to me, please. So let me make a hard left because I have no good segue here. Like her desire to help, some of the old Feyre remains, and we see that here in this chapter. She has a disdain for having so many things and really dislikes spending Tamlin's money. Side note, Rhysand will pay Feyre in the future. He'll give her a salary. And although this money could be considered hers and not his, is it really hers? I feel like it's just his money presented in a different way. But, you know, she gets to fight stuff.
I always feel weird about that. Like, it feels like a child allowance.
Yeah, it
right?
does.
Like, there's something about, like, here you go. You can go take care of yourself while you live in my house and we're going to have a joint income. But, like, this is your money, but it's my money, but it's, like, our money.
Yeah, we'll have to save that for later chapters, but I don't like it.
I don't like it either. It feels gross.
It kind of goes back to the whole men are always giving Feyre things.
Yeah. Well, stick around, guys. We'll cover that in future episodes. But for this particular instance with Tamlin, we have to remind ourselves that controlling money, it's also how abusers control the funds of their victim. That's why victims feel like oftentimes they feel like they can't leave. It's why Feyre calls it Tamlin's money. And when she eventually leaves Tamlin, she tells Rhys she has no place to go. Feyre needs her own kickstart in order to raise her own money, is what I wrote on the side.
We'll start a GoFundMe for Feyre.
Cursebreaker Feyre.
As Tamlin leaves, Feyre's going back to the manor. She has this feeling of discomfort because other fairies in the manor still cry with gratitude when they pass her in the halls. Remember in Thorns and Roses, after Amarantha has died and Feyre has been remade, she hates being thanked. She hates being thanked for a fact that she killed 2 innocents. And that's not gone. She's consumed by guilt right now. So, of course, she's going to continue to dislike the fact that people cry with gratitude when they see her. She really tries really hard to not dwell on this anytime that she encounters it in this chapter and in future chapters. But it's a huge feature of her life, and she can't escape it. It just traps her in her guilt more and more. And it really does play a role into how she interacts with other people. Because if they are the type of people to thank her for her sacrifice, she judges them for it. And I think that's a really important thing.
That's really harsh because as someone whose love language is words of affirmation, I don't understand. I mean, like, it's, please thank me. Tell me I'm good.
Your life.
Yeah, like I killed 2 people for you. You can go ahead and thank me for that.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to Feyre's mindset, right? Like, instead of reminding herself like, oh, I saved people, people are grateful. Instead, she's dwelling on everything else but that.
Yeah, she's choosing to look at the most negative aspects of the whole experience. Like, she's not looking at it as a whole of, I saved all of Prythian and the human world. It's, I killed 2 innocents, which probably makes her a better person than me. But it's like she just keeps focusing on the parts that make her the worst.
Right, which tells us she has a very biased perspective, that she's not capable of seeing positive right now.
Which means we cannot trust her throughout the rest of the book because she is an inaccurate narrator.
I was going to try and defend her, but she's pretty unreliable.
She is very unreliable. That's not inaccurate, unreliable. Same thing. But yeah, can't trust anything that woman says. So now we're going to go into Feyre's struggle, and I'm going to have a quote to start the section off. Celebrating a winter holiday in a place that permanently enchanted in spring hadn't done much to improve my general lack of festive cheer. Okay, Feyre, like, tell the people in Hawaii that. Like, this is literally the most minimal complaint you can have.
So I find this very, very interesting because when she talks about winter solstice, Feyre attributes winter solstice to either the day court or the winter court. And I don't know if that's because that's what other people have told her, but winter solstice celebrates the longest night of the year, so shouldn't it naturally be related to the night court?
You would think, Amy, because you bring a good point.
And
you would think.
You would think. And what this tells me is that Fae and Prythian are writing the night court out of the narrative because they are evil.
I'm going to say yes, but I'm also going to say we're not, like, maybe not all of Prythian, but for sure in the spring court, because she doesn't know anything else. I mean, she's only hearing what Tamlin is saying, and he's setting the tone for all of it. This is Tamlin, like you said, like, writing the night court out, trying to not bring Rhysand at all into this. Going into this whole winter solstice, that's when Feyre was born. And she talks about the fact that she doesn't tell Tamlin that it's her birthday. She didn't want to be she doesn't want to inconvenience anyone. Quote, mentioning that my birthday had also fallen the longest night of the year was the fact I conveniently forgot to tell anyone. This is an interesting moment. Can we hold this against Tamlin? Well, yes, obviously, he should have asked when her birthday was. Like, that's the thing you do when you propose. But this is also something that Feyre is measuring against Tamlin. She's setting him up to fail, because she feels like she's failing and needs to not be the only one to fail.
You know, that's so interesting. I agree on one level, but it's also not how I read it when I read the book.
Oh, how did you read it?
How I read it is that she doesn't want gratitude, and she hated all the gifts around winter solstice, so naturally she doesn't want any more for her birthday. But also, more importantly, she is now immortal. Why do birthdays matter?
Mm-hmm.
This is one way of her rejecting her immortality. in my mind, of not acknowledging her birthday. Because what are they in the drop of the ocean of immortality?
Okay, is that her rejecting her immortality, or is that embracing her immortality? Because immortals would be the ones who don't care about their birthday.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I feel like birthdays mean nothing when you have unlimited ones.
Yeah, so of course then that means like she would be like she jumps on board with being Fae pretty quickly, and I think this is one of those traits where you just pretend like it doesn't exist.
Okay. I may have talked myself into a circle, and you may have gotten me there. Thank you. I don't know what point I was trying to make.
Coming back to the fact that Feyre didn't tell Tamlin that it's her birthday, and like I said, she's failing and she needs him to fail. Ultimately, Tamlin is a punishment for Feyre, and he's a life sentence for her, something she needs to endure in order to be forgiven. To quote, "Centuries with Tamlin, centuries in this beautiful, quiet place. Perhaps I sort myself out sometime along the way. Perhaps not." Feyre's really hopeless and ultimately lost.
And really just doubts herself.
Oh, yeah.
Which, something we said in season 1, the moment she starts to doubt herself, we start to doubt her.
I mean, here we are doubting. Like, why is she not celebrating her birthday? Doubting her from chapter 2. Another quote we have here is, "All of those paintings, all the supplies, all the blank canvases waiting for me to pour out stories and feelings and dreams. I hated it. I walked out moments later and hadn't returned since. I stopped cataloging color and feeling texture, stopped noticing it. I could barely look at the paintings hanging inside the manor." This is a loss in many ways. In book 1, we talk about Feyre associating painting with thriving, and I made the argument that the painting was a merger with the feminine. She's lost the connection with the feminine now, but she's also lost the connection with everything else. I will say that painting is more than feminine, but also a sense of home for her as well now.
Painting has been so integral to Feyre and her identity. In season 1, one of our listeners, Emily, made a point to us that her painting room in the Spring Court, and particularly in Tamlin's Manor, was Feyre's inner sanctum. It was the place where she kept her heart. Thanks, Emily. Such a great point.
Such a great point.
What we're learning here is that Feyre is avoiding the painting room. She is avoiding her human heart because her human heart is leeching ichor into her immortal body. So what she's doing here is she's taking a page out of Tamlin's playbook again, and she's ignoring it, and she's trying to take control by avoiding it, because somehow by avoiding things you have power over it. Really bad life lesson to have learned.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really not convinced.
I know. I mean, Feyre, explain to me, please.
She's not here to defend herself. In season 1, we also talk about how painting is symbolic of safety and is symbolic of the safe and thriving Feyre. However, she killed that person when she went under the mountain. She closed off the safe, thriving Feyre in order to survive. Feyre doesn't feel safe here, and she isn't thriving. She is surviving. This is an important starting point for Feyre, since painting is so integral to her identity, as I said, and it's how she's always imagined her future. If you remember in Thorns and Roses, she talks about wanting to marry off her sisters, have food, paint in her father's cabin. Therefore, her feelings and desires around painting remain an important tell about her current psyche, and her current psyche is kaput.
Great use of kaput.
Really?
I know, it just made me happy. Feyre understands that she's powerful and she's probably equal to the Fae around her. I mean, like, she's way more equal above them, but she's still coping with that idea. But she doesn't feel like that's the truth. While Feyre is conversing with Fae at a party, she grips her tattoo as a way of reassurance because Rhysand saw her as capable and bet on her before anyone else did. So now we're going to go into the importance of appearance. Style of dress is particularly important in this book as it displays not just the location, spring court, night court, summer court, but also sets the tone and moods. Feyre, although suffering from PTSD and depression, wears bright colored dresses in the style of the spring court. While Feyre is doing this for Tamlin, Tamlin is also doing this to reclaim her innocence. At the end of Thorns and Roses, Feyre was dressed in the night court fashion, and she was practically naked, with her being on display as a sexual being. Now, with her wearing these dresses, Tamlin is reclaiming her innocence and essentially re-virginizing her.
Such a freaking good point.
It makes Tamlin so creepy.
It does. Ew.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
We also previously discussed in season 1 how safe Feyre wears dresses. And my particular favorite, Tamlin only compliments Feyre's appearance when she's wearing dresses.
That starts in book 1, and in book 2, it just doubles.
Yeah, it's totally magnified here. Surviving Feyre, on the other hand, wears tunics and pants because she needs to be able to escape, because that's what's important to her. It's no surprise then that Feyre hates the bright dresses that Tamlin buys for her. She doesn't feel safe, and he likes to pretend that she is, that he can still give her safety and comfort the way he did when Feyre was human. In this way, Feyre has become an ornament or a trophy. Feyre specifically says that she sees dresses as uniforms. They are a symbol of her duty to, quote, buy these people a measure of peace and comfort. As always with Feyre, she's only doing this for everybody else's benefit. Here she really doesn't seem that far off from the Feyre of the early chapters of Thorns and Roses. It's just a different setting. Immortality has not changed the people pleaser in her.
Feyre literally calls her dresses a uniform, which is what one wears in a role, like a soldier. Feyre sees her attire as something she needs to wear in order to go to war. That war is her life.
It's really sad. Ironically, she views the weapons she wants to wear with tunics and pants as fine jewelry. This is how she wishes she was adorned, which is a very telling thing given how she treats the real jewelry Tamlin gives her during the Day of the Tithe in future chapters. It's important to note that she gets to wear the jeweled dagger that Lucien gave her, as well as the matching belt he gave her as a thank you for Under the Mountain, I think is what it was.
Thanks for doing all that.
Thanks for sacrificing your life. Let me give you a belt.
That's going to match the previous thing I gave you.
Because I didn't come to save you. He being Lucien, appears to be Feyre's ally in these early chapters, and it is intentional that he's the only one who arms her, because he's buying her friendship, really, at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Lucien tells Feyre, quote, "You might as well look good if you're going to arm yourself to the teeth." Excuse me, but she isn't armed to the teeth. She's just bedazzled a little bit.
She's bedazzled.
So one thing I asked myself as I was reading this, do these bejeweled items disguise Feyre's identity by making others believe she's less lethal and less intent on true safety? Or is this an illusion of power and Feyre has been fooled into thinking she has some control by the males in her life?
I think because the dagger is jeweled and beautiful, it means it can't possibly be dangerous. Just like Feyre. She's beautiful, she can't possibly be dangerous, and that's why Tamlin allows it.
Because he's trying to control the narrative.
He dumb.
So appearance as a form of power is going to be an extremely important theme as we explore the various chapters of this book. How Feyre is dressed by others, or how she chooses to dress, is something we will be paying very close attention to in future episodes.
And we also see the men and how they're dressed too. We see it with Rhysand and Tamlin. Even in chapter 2, it says that Tamlin finished buckling the bandoliers of daggers across his chest.
In season 1, you paid a lot of attention to how Tamlin was dressed, and I don't think it was called a bandolier in book 1.
He definitely had something that was not a bandolier. I know that for a fact.
But it was always empty, and he has daggers now. And I think that really reflects his belief that he has power because his powers are back. Therefore, he's able to arm himself where he didn't in the first book.
For whatever reason, Tamlin being armed with daggers or swords or anything, I find it to be funny or ironic because he has claws.
Yeah.
So why does he need daggers?
Yeah. I can't keep this back.
Don't hold it back, Amy.
Not holding it back. So I'm going to bring this up again in the very last episode of the season.
Oh, this is a super sneak peek.
Super sneak peek. In the Hybern chapters, Tamlin walks in and he is wearing a bandolier of Illyrian blades.
Oh, shit. He's such a wannabe.
He's such a wannabe.
He's been a poser from the beginning. Like, you know what? It's kind of like whatever weapons Tamlin has is what he's trying to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Like, he wants to be Rhysand in that moment.
Of course.
Oh my God. Such a little bitch boy.
At this point, because we're still in chapter 2, folks, we are introduced to Ianthe. And Ianthe is a childhood friend of Tamlin's.
Oh my God. Okay, so I totally forgot that Ianthe and Tamlin were childhood friends. And I just feel like that they hooked up before. And she probably never stops bringing it up to Tamlin when they're alone. I could not stand her from the get-go when I first read this because she's one of those women who overly pretends to be your friend and she just wants to take over your life. And she's probably one of those people that's like, I don't have girlfriends because girls are so dramatic. But in actuality, she's the drama.
Oh, I totally see it.
Right? Like, when she's alone, she's like with Tamlin, like, we had fun that one night. She drives me crazy. After Amarantha, Ianthe is the first High Fae female that we get to see as a reader and who Feyre really gets to interact with. Ianthe is the opposite of Feyre and is supposed to be a friend. Feyre considers Ianthe to be the ideal female. From her looks to her actions, she is everything Feyre feels that she should be. What Ianthe really is a mirror to Mor. We're setting up Ianthe so that we can be introduced to Mor. Everything that Ianthe is, Mor is, but in a different way, which we'll show when we get there.
It's so interesting you say that because when you were ranting, I was like, that's how I saw Mor to begin with.
Because they're the same person. It pisses me off so much. I mean, I know it doesn't make me mad. I just get so happy I'm angry.
Okay, that makes sense. So what Ianthe is that she is Tamlin's perfect complement and Feyre's perfect opposite. Even Feyre herself describes Ianthe as brighter. To quote, honestly, Ianthe, with her bright gold hair, those teal eyes, elegant features, and supple body, looked more like Tamlin's mate, his equal.
Supple body, damn. Feyre sees Ianthe as Tamlin's equal. So in theory, what Feyre sees in Ianthe is what she sees in Tamlin in many ways, right? Feyre sees Ianthe as a crutch, and while friendly, Feyre doesn't show much love for the priestess, which can be said about Tamlin as well. She doesn't show much love for him. In book 1, Feyre fought for Tamlin, even wondered if there was a potential of humans and fairies being mates. And now she's backtracking to quote, I wasn't Tamlin's mate as far as I knew. There was no mating bond between us. Yet. Feyre is reaching here. She's trying to make it happen, but can't. I will say, I think she tried harder in book 1, and it's clear that she has her doubts here.
That is such a great point, and I think I'm going to talk about it more in a little bit, but I'm going to go back to how Ianthe and Feyre are opposites.
Yes. No, I love it. Ianthe is just opposite to everyone. She just sucks.
She does. I don't know if SJM really wanted us to like her to begin with, but if nothing else, Feyre's view of Ianthe really hones in on Feyre's self-hatred. And the reason for that is because everything about Ianthe is good and is mirrored as bad in Feyre. For example, Ianthe has a tattoo on her forehead that's appropriate, while Feyre has a tattoo on her arm that is brutal. Ianthe is good at spending Tamlin's money, and Feyre hates spending Tamlin's money. Ianthe knows the details of everyone in the Spring Court, but Feyre knows no one. And last but not least, to quote Feyre, she says of Ianthe, She was the heart of her people, ordained by the hand of the goddess to lead them from despair and darkness. But as we mentioned before, Feyre is dark inside right now. And if Ianthe is leading everyone from despair and darkness, does that mean she's leading them away from Feyre? Because Feyre wasn't ordained by the goddess. She was human.
Or is Feyre leading everyone to darkness?
Ooh.
It is her reputation phase after all.
Also interesting to note here, if Ianthe is Tamlin's equal, then why does she have no magic?
Such a good point. Feyre recognizes Ianthe as powerless, but if Ianthe is the ideal woman in Feyre's mind, then the ideal woman shouldn't be strong, which will be the battle between Feyre and herself as she's accepting her own powers. One more thing on how Ianthe is described. Here's the quote. Especially the celibate part, priestess could marry, bear children, and dally as they would. It would dishonor the cauldron's gift of fertility to lock up their instincts, their inherent female magic in bearing life. Ianthe, the youngest high priestess in 3 centuries, remained unmarried, childless, to keep enjoying the finest males the land had to offer. Okay, so this is interesting to me. We're setting up the idea that promiscuous women are considered to be negative. We can already guess here as a reader that Ianthe is a bad character, at least someone that we don't have to trust. And this is a trope in general that we tend to see, that women who are obviously sexual or promiscuous in general are automatically the bad guy. And I've got to say, in like that trope as a whole, I'm not a fan. Just give me a female character that's like screwed more than one guy and isn't ashamed for it. Please, like I would just bring that over.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because when I saw your note, I was like, well, Feyre got to fuck around in book 1. She wasn't.
2 guys. Like at the end, she's been with 3 guys. And the way that they set it up is as if Ianthe's like been with a bunch of guys, which like allow her to be with a bunch of guys.
Yeah, that's fair.
But as a whole, all of the main females here, I mean, except for Moore, we don't get to hear too much about her. But the sisters, Amren, like they're all pretty consistent with just like a short amount of guys, like not many. The list is not long. You're only saved as a woman in literature typically if your sexual experience is rather limited.
What about Nesta in Silver Flames?
She only ends up being saved when she commits to one man.
That is fair. Promiscuity is of the devil.
Not on this podcast.
I was just saying in literature.
Yes, on literature.
So as you were saying, this trope, we automatically either choose to or are led to distrust. And I think it's important then that we really pay attention to how Feyre describes Ianthe. Just like how Feyre rationalizes how she needs to do things for Tamlin's sake and for the sake of his people, Feyre rationalizes Ianthe's actions and tries to convince herself that Ianthe always means well, but her true feelings slip out sometimes throughout the narrative. This is another reminder that Feyre is an unreliable narrator and that we have to pay attention to when she's lying to herself and to us as readers. To quote, I was in no position to doubt. She hadn't led me astray yet, and I'd learned to dread the days when she was busy at her own temple and on the grounds. I'm sorry, Feyre, yet? As if you're waiting for Ianthe to do something? Feyre also remarks that Ianthe, as Tamlin's mate, would secure the power she no doubt was keen on building for herself.
She sees Ianthe for what she is.
She really does, but she, tries to obfuscate that. She makes it very obscure for us, right?
I go back and forth so much. I mean, maybe this is the part where, because we've dissected it so much, we're obviously Feyre hates her. You know, when you do a critical analysis, I think it's really clear that Feyre doesn't trust her and doesn't like her. But when you read it a little bit more pulled back, you're like, she's kind of here or there with her.
Yeah, I think I always read it as her not really knowing how she felt and just being like, well, Tamlin likes her, so I guess I like her.
Yeah, but when we critically read it, she says things like, oh, she wants power for herself. I'm like,
no duh.
Yeah, thank you, Feyre.
Feyre also recounts why Ianthe was not in the Spring Court during the years of the curse. To quote, they, being Ianthe and her family, lived in the Foreign Court, biding their time while their people were butchered and enslaved. She hadn't once mentioned it. I knew better than to ask. So did Feyre know better because she knew it wouldn't be worth hearing the excuses, or because she knew she couldn't trust herself to berate Ianthe?
Good questions. I'm not going to answer them.
Okay.
But they're good.
And finally, Feyre wonders if it hadn't been priestesses like Ianthe who had spread such nonsense among humans, speaking specifically about the children of the blessed and their ridiculous views about fairies. I mean, the fact that she attributes that to Ianthe, or people like Ianthe, is kind of funny.
It's really funny because, like, Feyre shamed the children of the Fae to begin with. Like, she's never respected them.
It's true.
And she's blaming Ianthe for that. So it's kind of like, you're the one who caused this. Like, the people I don't like. The evidence is there that Feyre never likes her or trusts her.
Oh, no. Not at all.
So, Feyre, why are you surprised later? I don't know.
It's true.
The way Ianthe talks to Feyre is so condescending and shows just how a little manipulation goes a long way. When Feyre talks about her sisters coming to the wedding, Ianthe says, "If it was important for you to have them here, Tamlin and I can ensure their safe journey." My actual note here is, fuck the fuck off, Ianthe. This is such a power move. Tamlin and I hate that. I hate that she says it. It shows that they're a unit and a source of power and authority over Feyre.
Which is going to come back constantly in the Spring Court.
All the time. Also, I just want to say, when I hate it, I love this. Like,
No, it's fantastic.
I love it. Yeah, I love everything that SJM's doing here.
So these are all clues SJM is planting that Feyre has guesses about Ianthe's ulterior motives, but is choosing to focus instead on the good that Ianthe brings to the table. Because you know what? She's not as evil as Amarantha.
She's
irony.
No, like Ianthe's like Umbridge in Harry Potter, and Amarantha was more like Voldemort. Dumbledore. She just was really out there like seeking truth and power. No, but right, like Ianthe's the evil that we all know.
Right, exactly. And she's the lesser evil.
Yes. There's like, well, we won't get into a Harry Potter discussion, but there's a debate on that.
What is clear is that in Feyre's mind, Ianthe and Tamlin are better suited for one another. How much of this is a belief that is formed out of jealousy on Feyre's part versus a belief that is formed because Feyre feels guilty or, quite frankly, just doesn't want to be with Tamlin anymore?
Oh, you love him. Go be with him. You're such a better match. Oh, we should break up because you guys are better with each other.
You must be mates because we're not mates.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
What's really frustrating here is that Tamlin always sides with Ianthe instead of Feyre. So, quite frankly, can't blame Feyre for thinking Ianthe is Tamlin's mate. To quote, "I'd wanted to push back about the wedding dress, hating that though he agreed with me, he, Tamlin, had sided with Ianthe. But it took more energy than it was worth."
If I was in a relationship and this was the situation,
the wedding would be off.
It would be off so fast. So fast. No.
What Ianthe really is she's a tool that SJM is using to show us how complacent Feyre has become once again, that she is overpowered by Tamlin and Ianthe and their relationship. If we have not convinced you that Ianthe sucks, how do we feel about Ianthe right now? Are we like Feyre and accept Ianthe for what she is, whatever that might be?
No, we are not.
Okay. So let me just continue to drive the point home why Ianthe is a terrible Fae. She talks about the High Fae and reminds Feyre that despite, quote, such elegance and wealth, yet the savagery remained. Elegance and wealth, quite frankly, just doesn't take the feral out of the Fae. And though Feyre thinks she can stand up to the Fae, Ianthe convinces Tamlin that it's a really bad idea for Feyre to learn how to fight.
You know, Ianthe, if she fights, she's like one of those fighters that just grabs your hair and pulls it.
Oh, yeah. Or she, like, picks up something and, like, throws it at you really weakly. Quote again from Feyre, "I was too watched, too monitored and judged. How should the bride of the High Lord learn to fight if peace had returned?" You know that's Ianthe talking. That's not.
Oh, 100%.
Even while Ianthe tries to pretend that Feyre is like the Fae, at the same time, Ianthe reinforces the idea that Feyre is different because the Fae are old and cunning and enjoy using words like blades and claws. Every word from your mouth, every turn of phrase will be judged and possibly used against you. And quite frankly, Feyre's just not one of them. She is other. She doesn't use words like blades and claws. And at the end of the day, Feyre's not like them and will always remain separate and on a pedestal.
Okay. I have a thought.
Okay. What is your thought?
Well, get on this train thought with me. Not train of thought. I said train thought.
Okay.
I will stick with it.
Okay.
All right. So in my idea, right, Ianthe wants to be with Tamlin. I think Ianthe knows the bid for power. In Ianthe's mind, like, she wants to be Tamlin's mate, right? She wants to be not the non-high lady, but the lady of the court. Clearly, Ianthe can't stop Feyre and Tamlin from having sex. That's the one thing they're very good at, is having a lot of sex. But what's another form of communication from Tamlin? He's a very physical person, right? Maybe fighting. I think that if Feyre and Tamlin had learned how to train together, it would have been an almost sexual experience for the two of them. Mm-hmm. And I think this is Ianthe's way of cock-blocking, or just trying to stop that level of intimacy between the two.
That is such a great point, because in book 1, we talked about how love is violence for Feyre and Tamlin. Mm-hmm. They bond when they kill the Naga together. And so if you keep Feyre away from learning how to fight, they can't have that like next tier emotional connection.
Because if they could physically fight it out, like Feyre eventually says, like, our relationship was always physical. If they could physically train, physically fight it, I mean, it's what brings her and Rhysand closer. It's a very intimate thing. She heals through fighting. Yeah. And Tamlin respected her before, and now he's not respecting her because he feels like he has to protect her, but probably resents her because he doesn't respect her.
Oh, good point.
Thank you.
Such a good point. So that begs the question, does Ianthe know what she is doing?
Yeah, I think now will say yes.
Does she intentionally sabotage Feyre because Feyre is fragile?
Ianthe 100% knows what she's doing. I would even call her a classic female villain. The trope that we all know, and I kind of discussed, of the beautiful woman who is exactly put together and sexual and obviously much better for the guy. It's something we see time and time again in movies and books and TV, and I don't want to call it lazy writing because I reserve the right to use this trope too. I would just say it's an exhausted trope. However, I do think that SJM uses it wisely, and I think that she's using this to set more up, and Ianthe isn't just the bad woman.
How much, though, is Feyre's description of Ianthe Feyre's bias and Feyre's perception?
Like Ianthe's actually really chill and cool, and Feyre just is super nice.
That's not what I'm saying. Maybe she's not as hot as Feyre thinks she is.
Oh, yeah.
Or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like when I'm super insecure, I look at women and think like they look like goddesses.
And they're not.
And they're not.
They're an easy 6, maybe.
Yeah. When I'm an easy 7, 8 if I try.
When you're feeling confident.
When I'm feeling confident, I'm a 12. Back off. But yeah, like not you, back off the world. No. No, but it's true. Like what? Like how much is it? Like is Feyre inflating Ianthe because she just feels so vulnerable and lowly herself?
Yes, exactly. So I agree. I do think Ianthe is intentionally sabotaging Feyre, and I was going to say receipts. I have facts.
You've got receipts. Let's go.
If none of what we've discussed has convinced you up until this point, because we've probably spent a very long time discussing it, when Ianthe is talking to Feyre about the wedding, she uses the word blood twice when talking about seating arrangements for the wedding, which...
so cruel.
It's cruel when you know that this woman seated beside you has suffered a lot. Then Ianthe also intentionally uses red rose petals at the wedding after Feyre specifically tells her to not use red.
We know what you're doing, Ianthe.
Yeah, like totally intentional.
I just wish that like Feyre had come back from the night court like after, she goes with Rhysand the first time and is just like, hey, Ianthe, we gotta have a talk here. Yeah. I said no red.
Yeah, she never calls her out on it.
Never.
Honestly, Ianthe's not worth the time, but...
Yeah, she is. My time. I want to see that happen.
Let's move on a little bit away from Ianthe. So remember how Feyre is not honest with herself or the reader about her thoughts regarding Ianthe, but we're honest because we're dissecting it? Feyre is equally not honest about or good at convincing herself that she is happy. When talking about the upcoming wedding, Feyre, quote, fiddles with my emerald ring. It'll be the happiest day of my life. Who is she trying to convince? Is she convincing herself or is she convincing Ianthe?
So I don't think Feyre is convincing herself. Again, I think when she talks about happy at this time, it's punishment, life sentence.
It's ironic that she's using that turn of phrase because the last time she used this was after summer solstice.
Oh, yeah, that was like her happiest day of her life. Still, at this point, that's still the happiest day of her life.
Yeah, up until this point, that was the happiest day of her life, and it's because she learned to have hope and see a future.
That's so sad. That was so long ago.
I know, and does she have hope or see a future right now?
Nada.
Not at all. When thinking about her wedding night, Feyre reveals to the readers that, quote, I'd yet to visit his, being Tamlin's, bed, though I'd wondered if our wedding night would change that. I prayed I wouldn't thrash awake and vomit on the sheets when I didn't recognize where I was, when I didn't know if the darkness was permanent. Maybe that was why he hadn't pushed the issue yet. No, honey, it's because he won't let you fully in.
For the sake of discussion, right? When you're doing a literary analysis, you can't just pick and choose the things that you like. You kind of have to do everything as a whole. So for the sake of this, let's just talk for a minute. Obviously, Tamlin has issues and isn't letting Feyre in, but Tamlin has shown a certain amount of consideration to her own recovery. Not a great amount, and he totally gets it wrong, but there is an argument to be had that maybe Tamlin really doesn't want her to be confused, so he keeps her out of his room. And even if it's true, it's not great, but he's also trying to help her not freak out, which she does eventually freak out.
Okay.
I'm not defending him. I have to say this.
I know you're not. It's true. And you know what? I could 100% believe it because Tamlin sucks at talking about things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of men, including Rhysand, make decisions for Feyre. We saw that in Thorns and Roses. We're going to see that here. People make decisions for Feyre without her being a consenting party and just assume that it's what's best for her.
7 men decided to bring her back to life.
Yeah, maybe she didn't want to.
Maybe, clearly.
So maybe Tamlin is being very considerate of Feyre, but at the end of the day, he's not talking to her about it and saying, you know what, honey, I am really worried about you. I would love to have you in my room, but I don't think that's a good idea right now because you're really struggling.
At the end of the day, like, Tamlin's biggest failing is emotional intimacy and his lack thereof.
Right. If we haven't said it 100 times, we're going to say it 100 times more.
It's 15 episodes worth more.
I mean, at some point we'll talk about Rhysand.
And his lack of emotional intimacy.
Also that. So with Ianthe and this chapter, we also see the first reference to the wolf. And this is going to be a recurring image that we see not only in this novel, but that we've seen thus far in the series. In Thorns and Roses, Andrus, as a wolf, was murdered by Feyre. And that killing sets off the events that get Feyre to where she is now. Here, Ianthe refers to other High Fae in the court as wolves. To quote, she says, "You, Feyre, and I are so alike, young and untested amongst these wolves." We're going to see more wolves as the story progresses. For now, though, the wolves remain the threat, and it is the other High Fae who appear as wolves.
So I'm going to say that Feyre becomes the wolf, and really she becomes Andrus. Andrus was sent to an unfamiliar world and ultimately die, which is what happens to Feyre. Rather than Feyre being reborn into the doe, she's reborn and eventually claims the very wolf she killed.
I have 2 little hearts next to this because it's such a freaking good point.
Thank you.
I can't wait to explore this the more that these wolves show up.
There's so many wolves in this entire book.
You know what? SJM is really good at repetition, and it's so intentional.
Oh, yeah.
Like, sometimes I hound her for how repetitious she can be. But here, she's really good at being intentional about images and making sure they show up again and again. So moving away from the wolf, I want to talk about sex as a form of power.
The more steamy side of this conversation.
Lots of steam. Tamlin uses sex to overpower Feyre, and quite frankly, she lets him. And it seems to be the only thing that she enjoys all day.
I get it.
So Tamlin... Lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
To quote, Tamlin let out a low snarl of approval, and he held my gaze through the kiss, claiming me, branding me. Very possessive, very animalistic. And we're seeing in this power dynamic that Tamlin is in power, which is so interesting when you compare it to the first time they had sex and she straddled him first.
Yeah, things have changed.
Things have definitely changed. What's also fascinating here is that, like the prologue, Feyre is broken, and it is so obvious during their lovemaking. To quote, "I shattered. For a moment, I was nothing, no one, and I broke and broke against him as he moved."
I can't imagine him being that good in bed.
What do you mean? He could be a great fuck.
I mean, I take it back. I think he would be really good. Not as great as Rhysand or any of the Illyrians, but solid 8, 7.
Passing. So, I'm sorry, is Feyre all right? Is she healthy?
Because she just keeps breaking.
Because she keeps breaking. At this point, she is a consenting party. Consent is still there. But she's using sex to cover up and ignore her fragile state.
I think Feyre is more than a consenting party. I would dare say that sex is the only time Feyre gets to be herself, which is broken and nothing. She doesn't have to put up an act that she's strong, and she embraces sex with Tamlin for that very reason.
I have to say, you're just knocking it out of the park.
Thank you. I've set my standards too high. It's not going to have good points next episode.
It's just episode 1. We just got to trap everyone. Stick with us for the rest of the season. Kind of similar to Feyre, Tamlin is using sex as a way to ask for forgiveness without really being intentional with his apology. This is a callback to Thorns and Roses and is reminiscent of right before their first time. To quote, Feyre says, "It's fine, I breathed. I understand. Not a lie, but not quite true."
This reminds me so much of how in Thorns and Roses when Feyre says in chapter 24, "I see I lied, not quite seen."
I love when Feyre lies.
Oh, Feyre lies.
She does. And SJM writes it so well.
It's simple. So simple and so impactful.
Mm-hmm. What's really happening here is that sex is a way for Tamlin to ignore the way that both he and Feyre are suffering. Quote, "Soon you'll be my wife and it'll be fine. We'll leave all this," being Amarantha and Under the Mountain, "behind us." It's so weird that Feyre says the same thing. I can't remember if it's before or after this, but she's like, "It'll be fine once I'm married.
Well, I'll be good."
It's all good.
Nah.
No.
A spoiler. No.
No. He then, I'm clutching my chest. He then kisses Feyre and performs oral sex to silence her questions. And this makes me so mad.
I am mad too. But if I need to be shut up, I am okay if this is the way that he needs to shut me up. I accept.
Oh my gosh. And what is he shutting her up about? It's about high ladies and why high lords only have consorts or wives, and there are no high ladies.
The juxtaposition of him servicing her while also taking away her power, not just from her, but from all women, is, I'm going to say it, chef's kiss. Great writing. Great writing.
It is really good writing.
Good news, guys. We got out of chapter 2.
Finally.
Entering chapter 3.
Oh, man. And you guys really wanted the wedding to be in the first episode.
Never was going to happen.
Nope.
Never.
So we start chapter 3 with Feyre remarking that, quote, "I couldn't remember the last time I'd even left the grounds." She is in survivor mode here. What we're seeing in these parentheses is that she's keeping track of the centuries and has a very long list of places in the manor that she can't go into because it feels too much like Under the Mountain. Even Lucian's red hair is triggering for her. As Jacqueline has previously mentioned, red is a really important color for Feyre, and this is just one of the ways that Feyre's PTSD is manifesting, and SJM is doing a fantastic job exploring that. When Feyre gets mad at Lucian for lying to her, which, side note, anytime someone lies to her and Feyre calls it out, it's going to be great.
Oh, wonderful.
Feyre pushes Lucian so that he staggers. She's showing us that she is stronger than she knows and more than others let on. Feyre is unable to process this because to do so would be counterproductive to her survival instinct since Tamlin won't entertain the idea of her having strength or needing training.
So let's get to my favorite section of this entire episode called Lucian's a Bad Friend. And I'm going to just say trigger warning for any Lucian fans.
Yeah, you're not going to like us.
You're not going to like this. Heads up. So let's talk Lucian. I want to start here with the point that many people bring up on TikTok, and it's important to address. People on TikTok say, what happened to Lucian? Book 1 Lucian, he was so funny, he had so much personality. What happened to that guy? What did Sarah J. Maas do? How is he so different now? I think that Thorns and Roses Lucian was having to deal with a Tamlin who did not have full power, and therefore he didn't respect Tamlin as much. He didn't fear Tamlin as much. If you go back to season 1, we discuss how not just Lucian, but a lot of people in this court did not respect Tamlin. And ultimately now in Mist and Fury, Tamlin has his power back and really Lucian is just afraid of him. This dynamic that we're seeing here is probably closer to the real dynamic that Lucian and Tamlin had before Thorns and Roses even happened.
You're totally right, because in book 1, they're more like equals.
Yeah.
Whereas now that Tamlin has his power back, and also note, he has some real anger management problems. Of course, Lucian's going to be a wimp.
And yes, we'll give it to him. Like, Lucian definitely has his own PTSD with everything. But Feyre keeps calling Lucian my friend as a description. She refers to him as her friend quite a few times, actually. And Feyre is trying to claim something that really isn't hers. Lucian is Tamlin's loyal courtier first and foremost. Then he's Tamlin's friend. Then he's Feyre's friend. Lucien is not hers to claim, but she does so because she's desperate for a connection to someone, but she's literally surrounded by Fae who will always place her second. Or third.
No wonder why she doubts herself.
Right?
So when Lucien lies by omission to Feyre about the Naga, this is because Tamlin has ordered him not to, and those orders are more important. I would like to ask the question, have they learned nothing about withholding information from Feyre?
Like, so much would be resolved if people just talked to Feyre.
I mean, that's all we talked about in season 1.
And the same thing is happening. Is like, this book would be so much shorter if it's like, can people just talk to Feyre? That's her memoir. A life in a day. Like, my memoir, if people just talk to me.
What's even more infuriating is that Lucien tries to make Feyre feel bad, as if Tamlin is the victim. To quote, he, Tamlin, is giving you as much free reign as he can. You have no idea how hard it is for him to even let you off the estate grounds. He's under more pressure than you realize.
Lucien is victim blaming her. He's gaslighting her, making her feel bad for Tamlin's issues. Let's be real, people. Lucien is facilitating an environment for abuse. Let's stop protecting him.
Lucien goes on to tell Feyre, quote, Tamlin is my High Lord. He gives an order. I will follow it. I am the first one the others look to. I set the example. Don't ask me to risk the stability of this court by pushing back. Not right now. He's giving you as much free reign as he can. Free reign? What else has reins? Horses.
Oh my God, it's true.
Women and their animal counterparts or comparisons is something I really want to pay attention to throughout Mist and Fury because it happens so much. We get our first taste of it here with Feyre being told she has free reign and also with her mare. Feyre's horse is, quote, a white mare, a sweet-tempered beast, if not a bit lazy and spoiled. This is exactly what Tamlin wants Feyre to be, but she isn't capable of it.
No.
Also, white like her wedding dress, like innocence, which totally sets Feyre off because she's not clean or good or any of that. Feyre says to Lucien, quote, does he, Tamlin, honestly expect me to spend the rest of my life in that manner, overseeing servants and wearing pretty clothes? Lucien, quote, isn't that what all human wish for? A handsome fairy lord to wed and shower them with riches for the rest of their lives?
Excuse me, Lucien. Yes, I would love that. And can you stop judging me, please and thank you.
It's just douchey.
He's such a douche.
But it's not what Feyre wanted. That's not why she came to Prythian. She was stolen.
Why are people forgetting this? It's like, isn't that the reason why you killed a wolf that you didn't know was really a fae and then stolen over here and we told you couldn't leave, otherwise we're going to starve your family? Jeez.
Sucks so much. One last note about these horses. Stamlin's we
will never get Tamlin's name right.
We can never say Tamlin.
We can never.
Tamlin's stallion in chapter 1 was black.
Tamlin, sorry.
And Lucien's horse right now is gray dappled. And that's totally intentional. Tamlin's black stallion is bad. Lucien's gray horse is gray morals, or kind of bad. And Feyre is white because I wouldn't say she's innocent.
No, but we see what she's doing here.
Yeah,
she is
it's intentional.
Yeah.
At this point, Feyre remarks to Lucien that, quote, I didn't realize I'd become a prisoner. It is so ironic that Feyre once told Tamlin she didn't realize she was under house arrest in Thorns and Roses, and he insisted she wasn't. Doubly ironic, then, that she told Rhysand she wasn't Tamlin's prisoner when they were under the mountain. Lucien rationalizes this by saying, quote, Tamlin is High Lord. You will be his wife. There are traditions and expectations you must uphold. We must uphold in order to present a solid front that is healed from Amarantha.
Ugh.
Because, okay, her friend, air quotes, thinks this. It makes sense that Feyre begins to think it too. Also, fuck men and their male traditions.
You know what he is? A fae male, aka a fail. You heard it, people. Lucien's a fail. A fae male.
So we learn here in chapter 3 that during the tithe, Feyre is told that, quote, as Tamlin's wife, you will be expected to sit with him. And if they can't pay, you will be expected to sit there while he, Tamlin, metes out judgment. It can get ugly. He'll be expected to hunt them down. The high priestesses themselves, Ianthe, grant him sacred hunting rights for this. This is super reminiscent of Under the Mountain, where Tamlin has become Amarantha and Feyre has become Tamlin. And I cannot wait until episode 3 to discuss this.
Also, if the U.S. government is capable of pushing back student loans because of COVID, then Tamlin can push them back too.
Oh, I love it. But also, tithing it's
the same.
It's
the same.
It's just stupid. Lucian judges Feyre at this point for thinking that their ways, being Fae ways, are brutal. I wonder why, because they were thought of by men. She is being judged for her human heart and her views about the tithe and the punishments.
Also in this exchange between Feyre and Lucian, Feyre has to ask Lucian what the tithe even is. It's because he's taunting her with power, and power is knowledge. Quote, "He waited and I wanted to spit at him because he knew. He knew I didn't know what it was, and he wanted me to admit it. Knowledge is power, and this concept is huge in this book. But what drives me crazy are all of the small power plays and the fact that Lucian's doing this to her too. Lucian might not be as bad as Ianthe, but he has done nothing to earn the title of friend that Feyre gives him.
Also, no one has fucking learned their lesson.
Stop not telling Feyre things. And also, like, what crappy of a move that, like, Lucian has lost his own power. Tamlin's busy telling him what to do. So the most Lucian can do is make Feyre feel like crap for not knowing something because she was a human.
Right, exactly. I mean, he has lost his power, so he's trying to gain power by lording information over Feyre.
Even though he pretends like, I'm going to go help you. I'm going to talk to him. No.
I'm going to give you a bejeweled belt.
A bedazzled bejeweled belt.
Lucian ultimately cannot understand Feyre, and Feyre cannot understand Lucian, and by extension, Tamlin. When Feyre warns Lucian she cannot stay in the house forever, he tells her that, quote, "He, Tamlin, will always, always seek to protect you, whether you like it or not, and he will do everything in his power to protect you from that danger again, even if it means keeping secrets, even if it means sticking to rules you don't like. In this, he will not bend, so don't ask him to, not yet."
Oh my God.
That's just not okay.
No.
Feyre thinks, quote, "Giving Tamlin time, letting him adjust. It was the least I could do, but no one's doing that for her."
No one's giving her time to adjust. It's like, hey, Feyre, you just became an immortal Fae. Let's get married 6 months later, or 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah, not even any of that.
None of that. When Lucian talks about why Feyre should be patient with Tamlin, he says, quote, "You will forgive him if his family's own slaughter keeps him from being so liberal with your safety." Seriously, Lucian, you're going to try to make Feyre feel guilty about an event that has nothing to do with her. Yes, there's a certain amount of like having to understand the context of everything, but Lucian isn't explaining it to Feyre. He's shaming her. And I can't stand by that. No, Lucian. No,
just not okay. Secrets and protecting Feyre is something that's really going to chafe at her. Though she seems to accept it now from Lucian and Tamlin, this is the start of a long list of lies that Feyre will catalog. It is going to inform how she treats people as she learns of their lies. And this applies very clearly to Rhysand too in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The gaslighting doesn't stop here. Feyre is judged for wanting to help the villagers and is told she isn't needed or wanted. Quote, "Your presence is a distraction and a reminder of what they, the villagers, went through."
How is it just her? She's the one who saved them all. The reminder really is Tamlin when he's the one who literally is the reason for the curse. Just saying.
So true. Oh, I know why.
Huh?
He's not there.
Like the lazy sack of you-know-what he is.
Like he's always been. Quote, "They did horrible things. Right now, they're trying to remember what it is to be normal, how to live. Bile burned my throat. But this wedding, yes, perhaps it would be the start of healing." No. This wedding is not healing. In terms of PTSD, Feyre is in the same situation as these villagers. And actually, I find this really interesting that SJM is illustrating rejection of the villagers towards Feyre. And this is exactly what Feyre is going to do Rhysand when they see each other again.
Mm-hmm.
One last quote from the villagers. "Feyre Cursebreaker," someone whispered. Well, that was a new name. So this is totally a callback to Thorns and Roses. As we point out in chapter 4, Father Archeron tells Feyre to go somewhere new and make a name for herself. And that is exactly what she's done. Feyre Cursebreaker is her new name. And this name and all the names that she's going to be called throughout this novel only remind Feyre of her trauma. And she learns to hate the identity that others give her because it's never something she chooses for herself.
Oh, so great. So freaking great. when Feyre is with the villagers, right, and she's walking around there, she says, "The utter similarities between it and the mortal land still surprise me. I might as well have been in my own village at home. I felt just as much of an outsider." Okay, so get ready to do some math with me here, people. If home wasn't home, and this is like home, then this isn't home.
It's like a Dr. Seuss book, but I love it. It's so true.
Her home needs to be completely different. That's why she thrives in the Night Court. The concept of home is just going to be a really big theme in this book.
And I can't wait to dive into it. Like all these things she thinks are home that aren't home. And yeah, it's going to be great.
Home is where the heart is, except Feyre has no heart because she's dead inside.
So, folks, at this point, we've come to the end of chapter 3.
Amazing that we managed to get to the end of chapter 3.
We managed it. And at the end of chapter 3, we have the daunting image of what Feyre's immortality will look like. Feyre wants to be useful and helpful as she's always been, but she is denied at every turn despite being stronger than she ever was before. She is gaslit and lied to by everyone around her, and their emotions are tools used against her to make her complacent. I feel like this is all neatly wrapped up when Lucien takes Feyre home after visiting the villagers, and he says that he is sorry. Quote, "So was I," Feyre thinks. "The vastness of my now unending existence yawned open before me. I let it swallow me whole." Where once Feyre was prey to the Fae and Amarantha, both of which she has proved herself against, she has now been stuffed into dresses and into a box such that it is her immortality to which she is now prey, and the unyielding expectations Tamlin and the Fae have for her and her new life. How Feyre views her immortality and the role she plays in her own story is central to Mist and Fury and the journey on which she is about to embark.
That's beautiful.
I am so excited to dive into this.
It's like this book is magical. I was worried about it, but guess what? It's pretty great.
Yeah, I really thought I was going to hate it by doing a literary analysis of it, but I do love it.
I do love it. So let's get into some breadcrumbs.
Finally.
Yeah. Luckily for this breadcrumb, there's no massive spoilers for outside, future, and anything work. So just within this context of this book. For Ianthe, the quote is, "It's like a game, all these pieces vying for power or dominance, willing to shed blood if need be. Feyre, humans aren't much better. My sister Nesta would likely fit right in." We learn here that Feyre has told Ianthe about her sisters and their family estate, and Ianthe seems oddly keen on bringing her sisters across the wall. Just saying.
Just saying. Also in chapter 2, quote, "I caught her glance then toward my left hand, the tattoos. It was an effort not to tuck my hand beneath the table. We could get you gloves," Ianthe says. So it's ironic that at the end of the book, Feyre is going to mate Rhysand. And by mating Rhysand and then becoming High Lady, she gets a tattoo on her other arm as well. And they look like black gloves. Even further, she's going to wear gloves when she comes to the Spring Court at the very end of Mist and Fury. And it's because she is disguising her High Lady tattoo.
Another quote on page 24. "I don't know if I can handle them calling me High Lady. They won't. There's no such thing as a High Lady." This is so ironic since the book ends with her infiltrating Tamlin's lands as High Lady of the Night Court.
And one last breadcrumb from chapter 3, Lucien, talking about Tamlin as High Lord versus Feyre's Tamlin, says, "One doesn't exist without the other. He is what he is." This is such an interesting thing because Rhysand is not High Lord unless he needs to be. Otherwise, he's just Rhysand, and everybody else treats him like he's just Rhysand.
So we're going to revisit the question that we said at the beginning. Is the jump from Thorns of Roses to Mist and Fury believable? Amy, answer for me, please.
It totally is. You know, I've heard it a lot from some of our listeners that, like, it's not believable. Like, how does Feyre get to this point? It doesn't make sense, but it really actually does. SJM does so much work in Thorns and Roses to show us who Feyre is when she is safe and who Feyre is when she is not safe. And we also know so much about Feyre's level of guilt. I mean, I remember when she thinks about how Claire Better died and the torture Claire Better endured, she thinks that she deserves that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is only natural that Feyre hates herself, that she doesn't feel safe, and that she thinks she deserves all the pain in the world.
This Feyre that we're seeing is so similar to Feyre from after the Mittengard worm. Like after when she's like dying and feels like she's just over life, right? They're so similar. And all we're getting more is someone who isn't on the verge of death, but inside feels like they are.
Yeah. And just like she convinced herself more and more under the mountain that she was in love with Tamlin, and at the end of Thorns and Roses, how everything would be fine because she's with Tamlin, she's using Tamlin and the excuse of Tamlin as a crutch to justify pretending.
Yeah. Tamlin's always been a crutch and excuse for her.
Yep. Well, that wraps up episode 1 of season 2 of Book Talk for Book Talk. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we will be exploring chapters 4 through 6 of A Court of Mist and Fury.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo.
Or find us on TikTok and Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk. Bye!
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.